So guys, last time we built out this project, but we did that with the old way of using Redux, and now I've updated it. So you can find the updated version in the master branch. I would drop a link in the description. So moving on to what we're going to be doing today, we are going to be rebuilding this, but now we are going to be using Redux. We are going to be rebuilding this, but we'll be using Redux Toolkit for this. So in order for us to get started, this is the official documentation for Redux Toolkit. So in the get started guide, we can an existing project, and I'm using npm, so I can copy this command, and if I come back to Visual Studio Code and I open a new terminal, so I can quickly paste the command, and I have to So we're going to be installing the Redux Toolkit. So it's npm install at Redux Toolkit. So now, coming over and seeing what we have the store folder, and inside here we have our exports. Okay, we created our store using the create store, and we have our index where we import or where we export all our action and our reducer and also our store. And we have this reducer folder which had this post reducer, and if we come over to our action, you will see we have this big this action which gets the post, and if we see our reducers over here, so our post reducer, we have this big switch statement that update our post based on the action type, and we had to define different case for our action and all the stuff. So using the recommended approach, which is now Redux Toolkit, in order for us to create our store, if we come over to the documentation, let's go over to tutorials overview, to the quick start guide, and you can see in order for us to create store, we need to reconfigure our store, and setting the types, we would do that. But if we look at our slides, in this case they created a counter slice, and this is just basically the file we need in order for us to set up our Redux store, which is quite our reducer, which is quite lean. If you come over to look at what we have here, because over here we have, for actions, and we have our action creators, and we have our action types, and we have our index, and we have our reducer, we have our index and post reducer, and we also have our store. So getting started now, I am going to create a new folder in our source folder, and I'm going to name this folder features, because I need to spell it, because that's the way Redux Toolkit now works. So we're going to have features, and in this feature we're going to have our posts, because our post feature of our application is what we are currently trying to build up in state. And in that post, we are going to create our post slice.ts. So it's a TypeScript file. And in order for us to create our slice, we need to import some things from the package we just installed. So from Redux Toolkit, we need to import create slice. So we need this method in order for us to create our slice. So first off, before we go ahead to create our slice, we first of all create our action. So we are going to need this in our slice, and that's why we have to create our action first. And we are going to export this action so that we can dispatch this action in our component. So we're going to export const. So this action is going to get our posts, and we can call it get post. And because it's an async operation, we are going to need CreateAsyncThunk, still coming from the Redux Toolkit package. And we create our post by calling this itslaribright function. And it needs a type prefix, more like an identifier. And we are going to call it post/getPost. And it also needs next the async function because it needs a payload creator, and this is what's going to actually create the payload. That's the action, and this is our payload creator over here. So it's going to be an async function, and this async function automatically, or when we call it, if it's more like a post request, we are going to receive the data over here as the first argument, and the second argument is the Thunk API, which is given to us automatically by the CreateAsyncThunk. And we go on to define our function, like this. So we have our try catch block, and in our try block we want to send the request to fetch our list of posts, and we're going to have it by saying response is going to await, and we can get the URL if we come over to our store and we had our action, so we can copy the URL over here, and this is going to be we can just define it as a constant, so const JSON placeholder API is going to be equal to the string. So we're going to await, and we will be using Axios. So let's go into import Axios from Axios. So we're going to await axios.get, and the URL is going to be our JSON placeholder API. Okay, and that's it. So we also need to set, as we did over here, so the return type, so what Axios, or the type of response that we are expecting from Axios, from this API. So we can do that over here it's a generic type, and we can say this is going to return our post array, or an array of posts, and we need to import this method. So we need to import this from our models folder, and if we have a look at it, we have our post which has a user ID, an ID, a title, and a body. So that's what we've got, and we should also go on to return our response.data. So we should go on to return that. Now we're going to see the use for the Thunk API, and in our error we can say this error is going to be of type any, and we can return Thunk API dot reject with value, and the value is going to be our error dot message, like this. Now we are going to use this return value to update our state. If at the end our promise, because it's an async function, gets rejected, we are going to use this value to populate our state. Now this is basically it for our action. Okay, and then let's move on to creating our slides. So we are going to create our slides over here, and let's go on to do that with our create slides method. And creating our slides, we are going to say const post slides is going to be equal to create slides, and create slides needs options, and options is an object. First it needs a name, well, not first, but it needs a name, and the name is going to be post, and then it also needs an initial state. So we can do something like initial state, and let's go on to define our initial state. So we say const initial state is going to be equal to an object where we would have loading. So this is the state we are going to need when loading our data, which is going to be of type false because initially we ain't loading. We also have We also have our error, which is also going to be null because there's no error initially. And then we are going to have our data, and this data is going to be of type post array. So sorry, not type, our data is going to be null. Yeah, talking about types, we can define an interface for our post state. So we can say post state like this, which is an object, and we can say this initial state is either going to be as post state like this. And here we're going to define loading, which is a boolean, and we also error is going to be an enum type. So sorry, it's going to be null, or it's going to be a string. And our data is also going to be null, or is going to be of type post array like this. So our initial state now references this initial state over here. And moving on, we have to define our reducers. So we say reducers, and for this is when you have normal reducers that don't have an async operation, where you don't have to wait or listen to the promise for the promise to resolve. And in our case, we have none, so we are going to leave this reducer as an empty object. Okay, but over here we're going to use extra reducers, and we're going to use this that has a builder, and automatically this is going to, we are going to have what is called cases. So these cases we can chain, and we can listen to the different states that we are going to have by our action, which is get post. So here we're going to say builder. So this method automatically gets builder, and so we say builder dot add case. We are going to add the first case, and this builder needs an action creator as the first argument. So we already have our action, which is here. So we have our action here, and we say get post, and the first case we want to listen to is the pending state. And in this pending state, we can now have a callback. So what's going to happen when this action get post over here is pending? So what's going to happen? And in order for us to update the state, this function gets automatically the state, and also it gets the action. Okay, and we can say, okay, if we are loading, we want to set our state dot loading equal to true, because at this point in time we are loading. And we can go on to mutate the state like this, because under the hood, Redux Toolkit uses a library that helps us, allows us to mutate states without affecting our whole application. And we can chain on another case, so we can add a case for, we can add case now for the fulfilled state. So we say get post dot fulfilled, and we add our callback, which gets called with our state and our action. So over here we didn't have to make use of the action, but over here we need to make use of the action, because we are going to define now a type, and we also get this fulfilled. Once it gets fulfilled, as you can see, we get this array of post here. So it knows, because that's what we said we are returning from the fulfilled state, and this is what happens, or this is the data that will return when our promise gets fulfilled. So we're going to say our action type is going to be of type, and to define the type we need to import, we need to import payload action like this, and we are going to say this is going to be of type payload action. Payload action is a generic type, and we say what sort of payload will this action contain, and this action is going to contain our post array like this. Okay, So that's what is going on here. And with this action, we can now update our state. First, we're going to say state.loading is going to be equal to false because we are no longer loading. And we're going to also say state.data because we have our data is going to be our action and our payload. And our payload is going to be an array of posts. So let's add up the last case, and this is when our get post gets rejected. So the rejected state. We also have our state and we have our action, which is going to be of type payload action. Payload action. And we can say it's going to be of type any, and we return like this. And then we say state.loading is also going to be false, and state.error is going to be equal to the action.payload. And this payload is what gets returned from reject with value error.message over here. So this is our reducer, somewhat our slice. So our slice, it has our reducer and it helps us build off from our action, and this is going to update the state for us automatically based on what happens in our action over here. So you can move this action to its own file if you need, but I feel it's okay here. And now we're done. We need to export default, and we need to export our post slice and .reducer. So this is the reducer part from the post slice, create slice. Okay, so now we have that. We can go on to create our store. And in order for us to create our store, let's see, I will come over here in our source folder, and I'm going to create a store.ts file. And in this store.ts, I'm going to import configure store from @Redux Toolkit in order for us to configure our store. And we also import our slice. So we say import post slice from here, and we say our store is going to be equal to configure store. Configure store needs an object and takes in our reducer, which is going to be our post slice, the only reducer we have in our application. And let's go on to say we're going to export. Now this is our TypeScript, and we are going to define first, let's export our store as the default from this file, and we can export our type. So our type of root state. So because we are going to need this type to know or to configure, we are going to need this type of root state to configure our dispatch and also our action, as you would see. Okay, so we have this type, and we're going to say this is going to have a return type. Okay, return type of, and this return type is going to be type of, like this. So type of store dot get state, like this. Okay, and yep, we missed equals to. So return type, and if we come back and we see we have this okay, we don't get it, but we have this store.getState method, which is going to infer the type of our root state. So we would use this root state wherever we want to define the type of our store. And yep, if we hover over it, it says our type root state is equal to post state. And if we check here, sorry, here we defined our post state here, like this. So another thing, we need to export type, and the type is going to be app dispatch, and this is going to be equal to type of store dot dispatch, like this. And in case you want to check out the documentation, you can come here and let's see. So this is it. So export type, and this infers the root state and the app dispatch types from the store itself. So directly from the store, we are getting the root state type and also the app dispatch type. Okay, and you can check out the documentation if to know more. But let's continue here, and basically this is it, and we can move on. But let's go on to define, because now we want to use dispatch, and we would be using it from we want to define our own type of state and dispatch, just as we have here. So we're going to come to this folder in our hooks, use type selector, and in this use type selector I would comment what we had from the previous code, and I'm going to import use dispatch and also use selector from React Redux. Okay, and I'm also going to import type, and the type is the typed, let's see, typed use selector hook from React Redux. Okay, because it's a type, so it's a type coming from the React Redux package, and we also need another type, so we need another type of root state, but this now coming from our store, and we need our app dispatch from our store. And with these types, we are going to now export our own dispatch, just as we did we do. Okay, we had our own use selector, so we are going to have our own as well use selector and our own dispatch. So we're going to use app dispatch, which is going to be this, and say app dispatch is equal to use dispatch, like this. But we're not going to call it, so don't do something like this. Okay, so we will be doing use app dispatch, and we'll be calling it, rather than call the use dispatch hook. So this is our own custom hook. We're going to also export const use app selector, which is now something like what we had over here previously, which is going to be typed use selector hook, and here we're going to give it our root state type, and it's going to be equal to use selector here. So with this we can come off here and delete everything we had in our store previously, because we're no longer making use of them. So we can delete everything we had there. Let's see. Okay, and that's basically it. But let's see where we reference in our store. Our store is sorry, not there. If our app JSX, let's see. Okay, so we would no longer be using all of this over here. But before I come here, I want to check the index, and our store would no longer be coming from this store over here. So we're going to import store from store, just to be sure. Yeah, so we're going to be importing store from store. Store does not contain a default export, so let's see. Export default store. So what's going to happen, I would clear, and later we would refresh. So coming over to now our app dot tsx. So here we would no longer be using all of this, so our use selector or our post actions. So we will no longer be using these. and we will no longer be dispatching as we're doing here, and we will no longer use dispatch. Okay, so what do we do now? We are going to remove this as well from there, and we are going to, first off, we are going to const take some things from our own selector. So we're going to use app selector, which we just defined, and this use app selector, if we can visit it, is this, and we have used our root states to infer the type of our states. So using this use app selector, our application keeps track of our state automatically. So we're going to call this, and this is going to return states. And the beautiful thing now is if we do state dot, it knows that we are going to get data, error, and loading from our state. So we can come over here and destructure instead. So we can destructure data because we are using it over here, and we can also get error, and we can also get loading like this. So how about dispatch? So for us to use dispatch, what we're going to do is we are going to come in our component, and we're going to say const dispatch is going to be equal to use dispatch like this. Sorry, not use dispatch. We are not using this package anymore, and it's going to come from use app dispatch. So our custom hook like this, and then we call it. So now we are going to dispatch, and we are going to dispatch an action, the action that we created in our slice. So this action over here, get post. So we're going to dispatch get post here like this, which is coming from our features post and our post slice. So we'll no longer make use of this. And if we start back our application, and let me just get rid of this to be sure it's working, and load localhost again. Okay, we don't see anything, so let me reload to be sure. Okay, we don't get anything. Why is that? And we don't get any error. So let's just log data to the console.log data, and to be sure we're getting back something. So it says null. So what this means is we are not updating our states. And let's come back to our store, our slice, and let's see. So the action.payload, so we're expecting something here, and we're returning it here. So let's be sure of what we're returning. Let's log our response.data over here, and if we go back to application, do we see anything? Nope. So our action is not being called, is it? Yep, our action is not being called, so we have to call our action like this. And if we save and we come back to our application, now we see something. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, do go ahead to show some love and subscribe. Thank you guys. See you later. Bye.